Ever stop to think about what really happens when you hand over your data, to your payroll provider,
Yeah.
or that cloud service holding all your company's important files? How can you be sure they're actually keeping it safe and
Well,
accurate and private?
It's a huge question these days.
Totally. Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes those complex topics and hopefully turns them into aha moments for you. Today, we're diving deep into something that's like the foundation of that digital trust, SOC engagements.
Mm-hmm. System and organization controls.
Exactly. We're going to break down what these SOC engagements actually are, why they're so critical if you outsource services, and really get into the specific roles that, the company's management and the auditors play in keeping everything secure and running right.
And some of those roles and required disclosures might actually surprise you. It goes pretty deep.
Okay, let's get into it then. Imagine like a company handling your payroll or storing your critical business data. How do you know they're doing it right?
Well, that's precisely where the SOC engagement comes in. Think of it as an independent checkup, a report on that service organization's internal controls.
So it's not just their word for it.
Not at all. What's really interesting, I think, is that it's fundamentally about building trust and transparency. You have a service auditor that's your independent expert working closely with the service
There's
organization.
a company providing the service.
Right, to assess their controls. But here's a key thing. The decisions management makes before the auditor even starts. They can massively shape how the audit goes, the scope, the timing, everything.
So management isn't just waiting for the report card. They're involved from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before the engagement even properly begins, management and the auditor have to sit down and clearly define who's responsible for what.
Okay.
Management needs to make sure communication is open. That's vital. And they have to pick the right people internally, people with the necessary knowledge to work with the auditor.
That makes sense. Setting the stage properly.
Exactly. It ensures everyone's on the same page about what's being looked at and what's expected.
So you mentioned scope. Does that mean it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of audit? Different needs, different reports?
Precisely. It gets really interesting here because there are different types. And the choice really depends on what the user entity needs to understand.
The customer, basically.
Us,
Yeah.
you, what assurance do you need? So let's start with SOC1.
Okay, SOC1. What's that about?
SOC1 is all about controls relevant to the user entity's internal control over financial reporting. ICFR, you might hear it called.
Okay. So if the server they provide could mess with my company's financial statements.
Then you need a SOC1 report. Think payroll processing, claims processing, maybe certain types of data center services if they host financial applications.
Got it. And you said management has specific responsibilities here. Sounds like a lot.
It really is quite involved. For SOC1, management has several key jobs. First, they have to define the exact scope. Which services, which functions, which business units or applications are actually relevant to their users' financial controls.
So narrowing it down.
Exactly. And this includes nailing down things agreed in contracts, like whether it's a Type 1 report,
Which is like a snapshot in time.
right, as of a specific date, or a Type 2 report, which looks at controls over a specified period, usually 6 months or a year, and how often they need to produce these reports.
Okay, scope and type. What else?
Then they need to identify any subservice organizations. These are other companies they use that might also impact your financial controls.
Like dependencies in the chain.
Precisely. And management has to decide. Do they carve out the subservice organization, meaning its controls aren't included in this report, or do they use the inclusive method, where the subservice org's controls are assessed and included?
Big decision.
It is. Then management has to prepare a really detailed, accurate description of their system. They select the criteria for evaluation, state their control objectives, what the controls are supposed to achieve, identify the risks that could prevent that, and design the controls to counter those risks.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive amount of prep work.
It is. And finally, they provide a written assertion. That's management's formal statement saying, yes, we're responsible, here's our system, here are our controls, and we believe they're designed effectively, and so on. They give this to users.
Their official stance.
Right. They also have to give the auditor full access information, records, people, and crucially, they must disclose significant issues. Things like non-compliance with laws, any fraud they found, uncorrected misstatements, control design problems, or controls that just plain failed, especially if those failures could impact user entities.
So real transparency is baked in. No hiding the problems.
That's the intention. It's supposed to be a very open process regarding things that matter to the user.
Okay, that's SOC1, heavy focus on financial reporting controls. What about SOC2 then? What's its angle?
SOC2 shifts the focus completely. It's built around what are called the trust services categories. Think of these as the pillars of trustworthy digital operations.
Pillars, like what?
Security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. The big five.
Okay, so this sounds relevant for like cloud storage, data processing, software as a service.
Exactly. If you're entrusting a provider with sensitive data or relying on their system's availability or integrity, a SOC2 report is what you'd likely look for.
Makes sense. How do management's responsibilities change for SOC2? Is it similar groundwork?
There's definitely overlap with SOC1, defining scope, identifying risks, preparing the system description and assertion, but the focus is different. For SOC2, management specifically needs to identify the principal service commitments they've made to users related to those trust services categories.
Their promises, essentially.
Yes. What have they promised you regarding security, availability, etc.? And what are the system requirements? How does the system need to function to meet those promises? They analyze the risks that could stop them from meeting those commitments. And then, critically, they design, implement, operate, monitor, and document controls based on whichever of the trust services criteria are relevant to the services they provide.
So it's tied directly to the service promises.
Very directly. And yes, like SOC1, they have to disclose significant issues, particularly any system incidents that seriously impaired their ability to meet those service commitments.
Okay, SOC1 for finance, SOC2 for trust services, security, availability, etc. What about SOC3? Is there a third main type?
There is. A SOC3 engagement is basically a more general use, often public-facing version of a SOC2 report.
Like something you might see on a company's website.
Exactly. Often used for marketing or providing assurance to a broader audience without getting into extreme detail. The key difference is that management doesn't prepare that super detailed system description for a SOC3. The report itself is more of a summary.
Less technical jargon, more reassurance.
That's a good way to put it. Management's responsibilities in terms of defining scope, commitments, risks, and controls are pretty much the same as for SOC2, but the written assertion is different. It focuses on disclosing the system boundaries and the main service commitments rather than that full system breakdown. It gives broad assurance without the deep dive required by a SOC2.
Got it. So management is doing a ton of work here, defining, describing, asserting, disclosing. But let's switch gears. What about the auditor? What's their main job in all this?
Right, the service auditor. They're the independent third party providing the actual assurance. Their primary objective is to get reasonable assurance.
Reasonable assurance,
Meaning a high but not absolute level of assurance. They want to be confident that in all important ways, what we call material respects, the service organization's description of its system is fair, that the controls are suitably designed to meet the objectives, and for a Type 2 report, that those controls actually work effectively over the specified period.
So they're verifying management's claims, essentially.
In a structured, independent way, yes. They then issue a report with their findings, giving users that credible, unbiased view.
And what does their planning involve before they start testing controls?
Well, first, they have to decide whether to even accept the engagement or continue it if it's a repeat. That's a big professional judgment call. Then they need to agree on the precise terms with management. What's the exact scope? Who's responsible for what? Which criteria are being used? COSO for finance, trust services criteria for SOC2. And they formally request that written assertion from management we talked about. That's crucial.
Okay. Now, you use the word independent a few times. We hear that word a lot with auditors. How critical is independence here, really? They seem to work closely with the company.
It's absolutely paramount, foundational. The service auditor must be independent of the service organization, the responsible party. This isn't just like a nice to have. It's fundamental for the objectivity and credibility of the entire audit.
So, no conflicts of interest.
Zero. And think back to the subservice organizations. If the main service organization uses the inclusive method for a subservice org,
Meaning they include the subs controls in the report.
right, then the auditor has to be independent of that subservice organization too.
Wow. Okay, so independence extends down the chain.
It has to. If that independence is impaired, the auditor can't issue a standard opinion. They'd have to disclaim their opinion, essentially say, we can't provide assurance, even if they were legally required to do the work. It completely undermines the value of the report.
That's serious.
Yeah.
Okay, so when they're doing this audit, looking at this complex system, Obviously, not every tiny hiccup is a disaster. How do they decide what's actually important? What's material?
That's a great question. Materiality in an SOC engagement is a bit different than in, say, a financial statement audit where you might think purely in dollar terms. Here, it's really about what information, or lack thereof, could influence the decisions of someone relying on that report.
Ah, so it's about the impact on the user's judgment.
Exactly. It's a professional judgment call by the auditor, looking at the likelihood and potential impact of risks or misstatements. It's not about the user entity's financials directly, but about the information within the SOC report itself.
Okay. Does that play out differently between SOC1 and SOC2?
It does. For SOC1, thinking about the system description, materiality is mostly qualitative. Is significant information included? Is anything missing or twisted in a way that would mislead a user about the controls relevant to their financial reporting?
Makes sense.
For operating effectiveness in a Type 2 SOC1, it becomes both quantitative, how many times did a control fail, and qualitative, what was the nature of the failure? Why did it happen? Was it systemic?
Right.
Think about general IT controls, or GITCs. If a service organization's key application controls totally depend on their underlying IT infrastructure controls, like access controls, change management, then those GITCs are definitely material to the system description. They have to be included for the description, to be fair.
Okay. And for SOC2 materiality,
Yeah.
still focused on user decisions?
Yes, but framed around the trust services criteria. The auditor thinks about the likelihood and significance of risks that could threaten the service commitments and system requirements related to security, availability, etc. And how well do the controls actually mitigate those risks? What information would a user need to make an informed decision about trusting this provider with their data or processes?
Gotcha. So when things do go wrong or aren't quite right, what kind of language do auditors use? Are there specific terms for these issues?
Yeah, there are a few key distinctions. You might hear about a description misstatement. That's pretty straightforward, an error or omission in how the system is described.
Okay.
Then there's a deviation or exception. That's a specific instance where a control didn't operate the way it was supposed to. One failure.
One slip up.
Right. Now, multiple deviations might point to a deficiency. And deficiencies come in two main flavors. There's a deficiency in design.
Meaning the control itself is flawed.
Exactly. Either a necessary control is just missing, or it's designed so poorly that even if it runs perfectly, it won't actually meet the control objective. It's fundamentally broken.
I see. And the other type?
That's a deficiency in operating effectiveness. Here, the control design might be fine, but it doesn't work as intended in practice. Maybe it's not performed consistently, or the person doing it doesn't have the authority or competence to do it effectively.
Ah, okay. Design versus operation. Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's imagine Brown Corp. They host email servers for companies. Their SOC report describes this amazing state-of-the-art security system monitoring email data access. Sounds great, right?
Yeah.
But what if the auditor finds out that system was never actually turned on, it was described, maybe even purchased, but never implemented?
Oh, wow.
That's a huge issue. It's a deficiency in operating effectiveness because the described control simply isn't operating at all. And it's definitely material because it means unauthorized access to sensitive email data could be happening, completely contradicting the description. That would absolutely affect your decision to use Brown Core.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, this is starting to feel like a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And you mentioned risk assessment earlier. That seems like a massive piece of this puzzle. How do both the company and the auditor tackle identifying and managing all the potential risks?
Risk assessment is absolutely fundamental. It really starts with the service organization itself. Management needs to proactively identify what could go wrong.
Thinking about threats.
Exactly. Intentional acts, unintentional errors, external threats like hackers, internal vulnerabilities, even potential problems with those subservice organizations they rely on. They need to look at every angle.
Okay.
Then the service auditor performs their own risk assessment procedures. They need to understand the service organization's process, but also independently identify and assess the risks of material misstatement, whether that's the description being unfair, controls being poorly designed, or controls not working effectively in a Type 2.
Before we dive deeper into risk assessment, you keep mentioning the system in SOC2. You said it's more than just tech. Can you unpack that a bit more? What is the system?
Good question. Yeah, it's much broader than just hardware and software. In SOC2, the system is really an ecosystem. It includes 5 key components.
Okay, 5 components.
Right. First, infrastructure. That's the physical stuff, buildings, servers, network gear. Second, software operating systems, applications, utilities. Third, People, the employees, contractors, managers involved in governing, operating, and using the system.
People are part of the system.
Okay, absolutely. Fourth is data, the information being processed or stored, how it flows, where it lives. And fifth is procedures, the specific steps, both automated and manual, that make up the business processes delivering service.
Infrastructure, software, people, data, procedures. Got it.
And the boundaries of the system have to be clearly defined. What specific parts of those 5 components are necessary to deliver the service being reported on? A system for financial reporting might have different boundaries than one focused purely on data confidentiality, for example.
Makes sense. So within that system, you also mentioned service commitments and system requirements. Can you give us another concrete example of those?
Sure. Let's go back to CompuGain, the payment processor. Retail Extracon uses them. Their contract might spell out specific service commitments. Things like, CompuGain must get customer consent before processing a payment.
Okay, that's a clear promise.
Right. Or CompuGain must provide a short privacy notice right when someone makes a purchase. Or they must respond to customer privacy questions within 10 business days. These are explicit commitments, often tied to regulations or specific trust services criteria, like privacy in this case.
And the system requirements.
Those define how the system, the infrastructure, software, people, data, procedures, is designed and operates actually meet those commitments. Like what specific process ensures consent is obtained, which database field stores that consent, who handles the privacy requests.
The how behind the what.
Exactly. And management is responsible for achieving those commitments and needs to disclose the principal ones, the really important ones, relevant to most users in their description.
Okay, so management identifies commitments, requirements, and risks from external threats. What about internal risks? What kinds of things inside the organization itself do they need to worry about?
Great point. They look at inherent risks. These are risks that exist before you even think about controls. Things like major changes in their operating environment, maybe new regulations come out, new key personnel, especially in roles that perform manual controls. Bringing in totally new IT systems or massively revamping old ones. Rapid growth, sometimes controls don't keep pace.
Yeah, I can see that.
Adopting brand new technology, new business models or products, big corporate restructurings, expanding into new countries, even changes in accounting standards or just shifts in the economy can introduce new risks that could affect their controls. They have to constantly scan their own environment.
It's a dynamic picture, not static.
Definitely not.
So management does this internal and external risk assessment. Then the auditor comes in. How do they assess risk? What are they doing?
The auditor has a structured approach. They must perform procedures specifically designed to identify and assess the risks of material misstatement. Is the description fair? Are controls designed okay? Are they operating effectively for type 2?
What kind of procedures?
It involves really getting under the hood of the service organization, understanding their processes for writing the description, identifying controls, assessing design and effectiveness. The auditor doesn't just take their word for it.
Right.
They use a mix of techniques, lots of inquiry, talking to management, staff, asking probing questions, observation watching processes happen, inspection looking at documents, contracts, system logs, reports. Sometimes reperformance actually doing a control step themselves to see if it works.
Like a spot check.
Sort of, but often more involved. They might read reports from internal audit or regulators, if available. A common technique is a walkthrough, tracing a transaction or process from start to finish through the system.
Following the trail.
Exactly. To understand the flow and where controls are applied. And importantly, they are always looking out for potential fraud risks. Could management override controls? Is there a risk of assets being misappropriated? They need to consider the potential for intentional misstatements, too.
Wow, okay. That is a deep dive. So let's try and pull this together. What does all this mean for you listening?
Well, I think the big takeaway is understanding that these SOC engagements are a critical mechanism for building trust in the services we increasingly rely on.
Right. In this world where we outsource so much, from data storage to financial transactions, knowing these frameworks exist is pretty important. We've seen how much responsibility falls on management before the audit even starts.
Defining the scope, describing the system, identifying risks, designing controls, making those assertions.
And then the auditor's independent role in verifying all that, navigating the different report types, SOC1, SOC2, SOC3, understanding that materiality isn't just about money, but about what could sway your decisions.
And seeing how rigorously both sides need to assess risk, it really is about transparency and demonstrating that commitment to security, availability, privacy, whatever the focus is.
It really highlights that it's not just about having good tech, but having the processes, the people, the procedures, that whole system documented, controlled, and independently reviewed.
Exactly. That independent review adds the credibility. It gives users like you a basis for having confidence in those providers.
So maybe the next time you're looking at a service provider, or even just using one you already rely on, you've got a clearer picture now of this complex world of controls and assurance that should be happening behind the scenes. It kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What questions might you start asking about the controls protecting the services you use every single day?
Yeah.
What level of assurance do you really need?